Hi, good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the North Carolina Botanical Garden. Whether you're joining us here in person or online, we're so grateful for your participation today. My name is David Michaud, and I'm our program and engagement coordinator here at the Garden. I'll be behind the scenes online to help out our online audience with their questions. I'd like to move on now to introducing our speaker today. Dr. Neeti Bathala is dedicated to making scientific exploration relatable and engaging for everyone. She's an accomplished academic and educator in the Philadelphia region, specializing in ecology and environmental science, and currently serves as a program expert with the Smithsonian Institution travel programs, working in Alaska, Costa Rica, and Belize. An award-winning children's book author, she also lectures widely to community groups and is deeply committed to projects encouraging STEM, particularly for women in the sciences. Her research on both terrestrial and marine ecosystems has given her a broader and more comprehensive understanding of global conservation. In 2024, she received a 3-year Fulbright Specialist Fellowship to serve as an international consultant in environmental science. Her work will focus on how community partnerships contribute to marine conservation in small island nations. So, Neeti, we cannot wait to learn more from you today. I will turn things over to you now.
Thank you. Good. Everybody can hear me? I have this thing? Okay, great. Welcome. I want to say it is so special for me to be here. Um, I actually learned about plants here in North Carolina, right here in the Triangle. I went to Duke, and my first experience was learning at the Bloomquist Garden of Native Plants there as a student. And it's rarely 18 degrees in North Carolina, right? It was the day of my final exam when I had to do winter dendrology and learn plants without leaves. So it's really always very special for me to come back here to the Triangle, where I first learned about plants, and to now come back and I get to teach for Duke Ollie as well. I teach traditional undergrad, so it's always great to see that audience. But I'm also getting now into teaching adults learners. So this is very special for me to come to North Carolina. So I have a lot of gratitude to be here. So thank you for coming to my lecture. I'm happy to be here. So we're going to do some adventures in ecological gardening. I've done a virtual lunchbox here at NC Botanical Gardens, but that was virtual. So this is my first time actually presenting in person here. So I am really happy to be here, and I want to talk about creating a wildlife-friendly habitat and promoting biodiversity. Sort of look at it from a lens of an ecologist. And so here's a quick outline of what I'm going to cover. How to create a biodiverse haven. And this place is magic. It's very different than the Duke Gardens, which are display gardens, and we use exotics there. And it's very different. This is really in concert with nature, the way nature intended things to be. And so that's why I really find this space a great place to have this lecture. And so how do you create an ecological garden? Well, we start with asking where we are. And usually where we are, we think plant zone. And we think about that, and that's usually what we think. But there's more going on. I want you to think about the biome we live in. I want you to think about ecoregions. And a lot of people, they know their plant zone, but they don't know the ecoregions. And so I will give you the info for you to look it up. And the great thing about ecoregions is you can actually pick out a particular tree that should be in your property based upon what ecoregion you're in. So hopefully that'll be useful to you. And that's a little bit about microclimates, which you may know about. And then I will give some top 10 gardening tips, wildlife tips, and how we can sort of landscape for wildlife, thinking about habitat rather than just food. So if I said I wanted a particular bird species, rather than feeding the hummingbird, let's create a habitat for the hummingbird, because to create a habitat is more than just providing food. So that's a quick outline of what I'll cover, and then I'll happy to answer questions at the end. Okay, so to create a biodiverse haven, you actually need an ecological garden. So what's an ecological garden? So what is an ecologist? I know I went to an international conference and I told somebody I was an ecologist and they didn't understand what that meant. And I said, well, it's within bio, and I'm not talking. And finally her face lit up. She said, nature, you study nature. And I said, yes, that's it. So an ecological garden is actually studying biology, or the living things. And living things could be the plants and the animals and the bacteria and the fungi and all of our kingdoms. But how is it reacting with our abiotic or non-living elements? And so water, without all the stuff in it, is pure water is abiotic. Our wind is abiotic. Our sunlight, it's an energy source, but it's abiotic. These are non-living things. So soil, water, weather, but also when we think about abiotic things, think about the aspect. The northern slope of an area may be cooler than the southern slope. And so a garden that is in cooperation with the natural environment, everything around it, whether it's the direction that the sun is coming in, the wind that's coming in, all of those abiotic things create sort of this environment, this ecosystem. And that's what we want to do. We want to work in an ecological garden where we're working with the abiotic factors as well as our biotic factors. And right now, our abiotic factors may be changing a little bit. They're, we know as gardeners that things are starting to change, certainly for me, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, where are we? Let's start here. We're just on the, we're on our wonderful blue planet here, and then we start thinking about the terrestrial biome we live in. And you may know we live in eastern deciduous forests, and I'll talk about our biomes here in a minute. And there's more, it depends on who you ask, how many biomes there are, but I'll discuss that. Then we start thinking about those ecoregions, and that's what I want to talk about so that you can go look up, and even if you don't live in the triangle, if you have a place in Chicago, if you're on the West Coast, you can look up the ecoregion and actually bring it down to what plant could be planted there. Then we'll talk a little bit about microclimates, and then, the ecosystem, which is our biotic and abiotic factors working together, and then looking at a community of organisms and then an individual organism. And just sort of think of this counterclockwise, going from the broadest to the narrowest to support our garden in our backyard, or to support a whole region that we might be interested in preserving. Okay, so here's a list of the terrestrial biomes of the planet. There is some argument how many there are. Generally, when you're learning, and maybe if you remember back from, bio or ecology, whenever you may have learned this, they generally say that there's 10. So you think of the tropical rainforest and the desert and the eastern forest and the savanna and those general broad ones. What people are trying to do now is actually make more. The more there are, the more possibility you have to ask for protection for them, right? To say, oh, this little sliver of tropical dry forest only exists here. Let's protect it. It is not the same as desert. It's not the same as savanna. It's not the same as tropical rainforest, but it's something unique. And they're doing that in Costa Rica in the northwest corner. It's very dry there, but it's tropical dry forest. And so there's a little bit more depending upon who you go to. Books will usually have it about 10 biomes. World Wildlife Federation, I think, is around 14. The ecologists are pushing for 18 to 20. So generally, here's the broad ones. It used to be the desert was only one type of desert. And so now we're trying, we've got a polar desert and we've got, drier, more tropical deserts. So those are there as well. So here we are in in temperate, we're not tropical, we're temperate broadleaf forest, also called eastern deciduous forest is what we are in. And it's sort of that limey green there. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And the biomes are generally characterized by temperature and precipitation. All right. So if you have one biome, and the same biome is repeating itself elsewhere, it's got a similar temperature regime and a similar precipitation regime, and that can be above or below the equator, northern or southern hemisphere, you're going to get the same. So I wanted to pull out the temperate broadleaf or deciduous forest. Deciduous means to drop, so like your teeth drop, your baby teeth, it's the leaves drop. And in our case, they drop because of our temperature that's happening. And of course, sunlight is playing into this as well. The abiotic are playing into it. In the tropics, what you'll get is a deciduous forest, but it's because of moisture. And so they have a monsoon season and a dry season. The dry season, they'll still drop their leaves, and it looks like a wintertime landscape here if you go to a tropical dry forest. I encourage you to go before they're gone. It's really just spectacular to be in the tropics and just have a landscape like ours in the winter. So if you look at the temperate deciduous forest, here we are, eastern coast of the US, of course, this is what we have, but it's all across, Northern Europe, it's into Asia. And this is why, if you're shopping for plants, you will see things like a camellia. It's Camellia japonica. It's from Japan. Or think of the beautiful cherry blossom festival that we have in DC. The reason that cherry blossom, given to us as a gift, does so well is because we have similar temperature and precipitation regimes. And so we can have things, and if you think of the Cercis canadensis or the redbud tree, which is our native species, canadensis, North America, Canada, we also have a Cercis chinensis, which is, it's way prettier if you like pretty blooming floriferous things. It's not native though. So here's where you can see two species, they're the same genus, but look at the species name to see if it's native to where we're at, rather than getting the one that's maybe native elsewhere. If you were wanted to be native, if you wanted to go completely native, which I encourage, but I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not a purist. I was trained to the Duke Gardens, which is a display garden, and I like plants, and my favorite plant is still my Edgeworthia. But when you can, make the choice to do native, absolutely. And this garden here is a great example of that. Same thing with Hamamelis, which is our witch hazel. You know, looking at the species name to determine whether or not it's from our area versus elsewhere would make a difference. And you can break that down into region, which I'll talk about the ecoregions here in a minute. And if you've been to the Duke Gardens, right now we're under construction. It's a big thing. I'm here for the board meeting, actually, the Duke Gardens board meeting. And yeah, I'll find out more what's going on tomorrow, but it's big stuff going on over there. They have the Asian woods there. So you'll see all of these things. Again, temperature precipitation is similar, and that's why the Asian wood species live just fine here in North Carolina in our gardens for that reason. Okay, so now let's get into what these ecoregions, and I don't know if you've heard of ecoregions before, but this is the webpage right here. You can look it up on EPA, you can go into ecoregions, and you can figure them out. And they're nested, actually. This is at level 1, and they're broadly based upon the biomes that I'm talking about, right? So you've got your eastern deciduous here, you've got your Great Plains, great soil there, by the way. And so the marine West Coast forest, where you have that wonderful marine layer coming in and keeping things moist, it's very different than what we get with our dry spells. And so this is level 1 that you can go in and look at, and you figure out here that we are actually in the eastern temperate forest here, and that is North Carolina. It's where I live now, outside of Philadelphia, in New Jersey. There are 15 ecoregions at level 1, and so like I said, you can go to that website. If you've got a place somewhere, you've got family on the West Coast, you can train them appropriately and figure out what ecoregion is over there and choose that as well. So when we're talking about a particular biome or an ecoregion, it has certain characteristics that are similar. And so similar where I live in South Jersey, the Philly area, or here, it's warm, humid temperature. It's a warm, humid climate. It's warm and humid. To me, it feels warm for October, but maybe it's not. Maybe this was North Carolina October and I'm forgetting. So it rains quite a bit here, generally. I think we had about 60 inches of rain in the triangle. I think that's what happened last year there was a lot last year, I believe. And then there were spells of drought, same thing that happened up in my area. Dense forest canopy, usually oak, hickory, pine, and we can look around and we can see all of that here. And a lot of diversity. I want you to know that the diversity of tree, vine, shrub species here is beautiful. You can be native here in your garden and it would be spectacular because we have such beauty. I mean, think of the redbud and the dogwoods and the vines even. I mean, we've got some beautiful stuff. A lot of diversity. That diversity then in turn attracts the wildlife. So we really do live in a great area, I have to say that. And so abundance of streams, lakes, wetlands, again, because of the moisture that we have. And then the big thing here is that the soils are leached. And what that means is that we've had enough rainfall over eons that the good nutrients, a lot of the calcium and the magnesium, have pulled out of it. And that's why we get that red clay soil, right? It's iron oxides, iron and aluminum oxides is what you're getting there. And so that is generally what you get in this region 1. Not getting that down in tropical Florida, but in our East Coast region into, right about the middle here until you get into the Great Plains. This is the general parameters that are defining this particular level 1 ecoregion. So then we'll go into level 2. Now, I know you can't necessarily read this, but I hope you go online and check this out. And so here's what I won't even get into it. I am going to zoom in onto the triangle and talk about this, but this just gives you a level of how much more nesting we're doing. Now we're into 50 nested regions in level 2. And so what I did was I went ahead and pulled up our area here. And if you look at the Carolinas, North Carolina, you have three regions here. You have the sort of plains, you have forest, and then you get the coastal plain, right? And so things change as you're driving across the state. And as you've gone to the coast, you probably see how things change. Same thing. I live in, New Jersey, and we change. We get into Atlantic coastal forest. We get into the Pine Barrens. It's very similar. People make fun of New Jersey, but we're really actually ecologically quite diverse there. It's a tiny little state, but we're very dense in population, but we have a lot of ecological diversity there. And so this is where you're getting here. You're getting these, these three different areas that you can remember if you've gone then from Asheville down to the coast. You can see those types of things change. Okay, now we're getting into level 3. Absolutely can't see this. I hope you go online and find it. And I know that. I just wanted to give you a broad picture of all of these levels that we have in terrestrial ecoregions. Okay, here we're going to go ahead and zoom in, and you can see where Charlotte is there. And you can see, let me see. Right here's Raleigh right in here. Raleigh's right here on the edge between the Piedmont and the Southeastern Plain. It's really close, right? It's very close. And if those of you who are gardeners and you've followed the change in your actual garden zone, you'll see that the change happened very close to that Raleigh line, right? It gets dry and hot there, okay? So here we are at level 4. What's happening at level 4 is you can actually figure out the soils. And the soils, an abiotic component, ends up determining what grows best there. And you may know this just from being a gardener. For instance, if you want to grow blueberries, they love acid soil, right? You don't want to put them in some nice, rich, something with a lot of like potting soil. It's not going to do well. It wants acid soil. Throw some pine needles on there. Really give it what it wants. And when you give something what it wants, it grows really well. And you don't need to play with it too much. You don't need to baby it too much. And so one of the things you're getting at level 4 is that you're going and you're figuring out what your soil types are, and those soil types then can dictate what you want to plant in your area. And so going in, here's Raleigh, here's Durham, and then Chapel Hill would be right there. So we're right in this region. And again, there's 3 different soils for 3 different cities and universities. We also have 3 different major soil types as well. And so what I've done, I've gone ahead and zoomed in on it here. And so what you're having here, humid subtropical climate, these are some examples of the birds. And again, if when you go into this site, what's great is you can actually find what animal species you should find, like what species would be native in this area, what tree species would be native, what soils would be native. And you can get all this as you look on the website, which is great. And let me go in and show you. It's interesting. I think like we're right over here. And so it really does change if you look at the official triangle between the 3. And depending upon where you live here in the triangle, you could determine what would be best to plant in your garden that would be most native to the area. So here's the wonderful summary table. Again, I know you can't necessarily see this, and I don't know if I give you the PDF, but this is what you would find if you go online. And what it's giving you is actually the type of soil, the general temperature that you would find, and those types of things. And so here's the forest tree composition. I pulled one thing out, just the forest tree composition. If you were in Chapel Hill, where guess that would be where we are closest to, you start to pull out what particular species you would find here. For instance, it would be shagbark hickory if we were looking for a hickory that we wanted to buy, and you went to a native plant nursery and that's what you would want to buy. If you were in Durham, more likely to look for a maple or a tulip poplar or a red, northern red. And then in Raleigh, we're starting to get more Virginia pine because it's getting drier out there and a little bit warmer as you're going towards the coast. And so it's very interesting. Let's say you have a house and you don't know what tree. You want to buy a native big shade tree of some sort. What would you buy? You could zoom it down to these levels and figure out what likely your soil is, and then figure out here, in this case, this is the tree composition, what you might be able to choose for your yard. And so I was talking to some folks at the Duke Gardens, and one of them lives in the Chapel Hill area and somebody lives closer to Raleigh, and they said, well, we can't buy the same things. We want to buy different trees that would be more native to where we're located. So yeah, you can use this. I think it's really great to actually zoom in if you were unsure and pick something that really would be perfect for your particular location. So I really thought that the ecoregions are important, and it's this information that's available to us as the public that we can go in and find this. And so here's our, I'm sorry?
The X in front of the Virginia pine.
Oh, not to choose Virginia pine, but to do some other things in here. Yeah, the loblolly
I
pine,
think
shortleaf.
people could live 90 years in Raleigh and never see a Virginia pine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So here you'd actually choose shortleaf and loblolly. Yeah, things like that. Okay, so you know the soil here? It's that clay, that red clay. Let me tell you, if you're wearing white and you do field work, I've fallen in this in my years of doing field work down here. It doesn't come out of your clothes. And you know that it's iron oxide, right? That's what it is. And that's generally the soils we have around here. Native soils are ultisols, they're weathered. Moderate fertility, but they're weathered. And by weathered, they've been all of the rain we've had over the eons has taken away those nutrients. And so sand silt clay, you can actually do a little ribbon test to figure out there's a lot of clay in these soils, and acidic, deficient in calcium and potassium. So in a garden, let's say a vegetable garden, those are the things that you typically would want to put in, your calcium and your potassium. And yeah, you can go down and you can see that it's a pretty narrow organic layer up on top. And so I've done a lot of digging in these over the years, and this is a picture actually from NC State, so very close by, but this is what it looks like. And if you're first, let's say you're not an experienced gardener, if the first thing you did was go to your yard and start digging, and this is what it looked like, you'd probably be pretty discouraged. You'd have to put some organic matter to, at least for your vegetable gardening, right? So, okay. So you know the U.S. plant hardiness map. I think that the gardeners would know the U.S. plant hardiness map. I know the undergrads might not, so hopefully you guys will learn. So essentially the plant hardiness map divides the U.S. into areas based on 10-degree Fahrenheit differences, and the bottom is the minimum value, right? And so generally the continental U.S. is between zones 2 and 10, right? For those of you who don't know, I know maybe my experienced gardeners would know that. And so you probably know, when I was studying here at Duke Gardens, and so this was, over 20 years ago, we were in 7B. We've changed, right? So we're actually, us, meaning the Duke Gardens and here's is the same. We were in 7B back then. And I remember thinking, I'm from the New Jersey area, I remember thinking, this is the most perfect place to garden. Spring comes early, winter comes late. You have such a diversity of species. It was so hard to study. I had to learn so much when I was learning in that field. But so that was then. It was 7B. Guess what? I live in 7B now. The 7B moved on up to where I live. I moved back to the area where I grew up near New Jersey and near Philadelphia, and I'm now in 7B. And that here, you could see how close the Raleigh line is to the next planting zone. Do you see it? It's really close. You could just drive on over to it and look up what ecozone you're in, and then base your decisions on planting on that. And so here it is now, you can see, and certainly it is, you guys are 8A right here, and in the Duke Gardens, you've moved up. And I am 7B. What I said was the perfect planting zone. Now I officially live in that. And then we'll see what happens. They just updated this in 2023. It was updated in 12 and then in 2023. I am teaching a class on weather right now for my undergrad students, and we were looking at the number of the hottest years on record, and since 2016, the past 10 have all been the hottest. And so I imagine, thinking of that, if the bottom value, it's not getting colder in the winter, that we might have an update to this in less than 10 years, I would think. I really do think it's going to update again, particularly if we're looking at the last 10 years and all these really hot years. And we are in line this year for 2025 to be in the top 3, we think. We still have a couple months left, but it might be, it's going to be another hot year. Not the hottest, but definitely another hot year. And so if our bottom level's not getting as cold, we may need to update our map, and then you guys will be in 8B and I will be 8A. That's where we're going to be here soon. So I think probably by 2030 we'll update. That's just my feeling. Not, I don't have any evidence on I don't work with the people who update the maps, but I'm just looking at the weather that we've been having. Okay. And so when we talk about our plant hardiness map, we're looking at that bottom number, the cold number, but I also want to talk about a heat zone map. And so there is this wonderful place, I think it's called the Cotton Room. It's a restaurant in Durham that I go to when I come in for meetings. And when you walk in, and I'm sure there's places like this in Chapel Hill, they've got these 3 foot tall rosemary hedges that are just, you walk by and it's so beautiful and fragrant and they're spectacular. And I said, I want this. I'm in 7B now, I could do this. Oh no, I can't do this. I tried, they froze, they died. It's because I do not have the number of average heat days yet, I'm going to say yet, that you do down here. And heat days are temperatures that rise above 86 degrees. And so it's important when you think about plant hardiness to also think about the heat days that you get. And so I might be in a 7B climate now, but I'm not getting as many days above 86 that you all were getting back when I was even a student here. And so I imagine that that will change. We had a very hot summers, and so we're in a changing climate right now. We can't really predict what's going on. There's a lot of models that are predicting things, but so I want you, when you're thinking about things, to not only think about your hardiness zone, which I think gardeners automatically we learn our hardiness zone, and we learned in 2023 that it changed, but to also think about the heat zone. So I cannot grow the rosemary hedge the way you can here because I don't have enough heat days. And so think about that as well. And so here's the heat zone map right here. And you can see again, if this is generally the area, there's over 90 days as you're going in the coastal plain that are above 86 degrees as you're going towards the coast. But then it cools down because you get the tempering effect of the Atlantic Ocean right along the coast there, which makes a difference. Okay? And so here to also think about microclimate. And we may know this from our small gardens, like our vegetable gardens, to put things against, the wall if we want fruit to ripen. And, if you watch things like this. I have a friend, he also went to Duke. He lives north of Philadelphia. So actually a different planting zone than me because I get heat island effect from the city. I walked in his backyard and he's a big gardener. He had two longleaf pine. Longleaf pine are not northern species. You don't see them where I live. Longwood Gardens might have one, but they're Georgia species to me. When I studied it, I was at Georgia. He had two. I said, they're big. I said, how did this happen? He said, look what I did. That's my Southwest brick wall. I stuck it in there, and every winter when it was young, I would go out and I would cover it because I wanted a longleaf pine. It reminded me of the South when we went to school down there. Okay. And so he has managed to grow it, and now it's well established, but he babied it for the first 10 years. Now, it shouldn't be growing where we live, but he wanted what he wanted, and he made it happen. So microclimate makes a big difference. It can allow you to grow things that normally wouldn't, or it can create a coldness. And what was happening here with my rosemary, it was up against like this pavement that the cold in the winter was radiating cold, and it was killing it. I actually just wanted to, this is interesting when I talk about urban heat island effect with my students. Certainly we know in the city, this is just temperature on the y-axis, it's hotter in the city. If you go into the city, all of the pavement, all of the asphalt, it's hotter. And then if you go into like the park areas, it will lower. Look at the little blip that you get in suburban residential. Do you know why? Parking lots at Home Depot and Costco. It's actually pavement, so that when you get into the suburbs, if you do little microclimate temperatures, and I'll have students sometimes go do it, because of all of our parking lots for our shopping in our suburban areas, we'll get a little blip that we wouldn't get into, in a setting like this. Yeah, so you do get a little bit of that heat bump when you get into the suburbs, when you have your shopping centers. It makes a difference. And so certainly your microclimate can be natural, like what we're getting along the West Coast with the marine layer that rolls in every morning, and it's wonderful for vineyards, actually. That's what it's wonderful for. And asparagus, apparently. I've learned because I tried to grow asparagus, didn't work. And so, yeah, those are types of things you think about, people create rain gardens now because you get this area that's maybe wet in your lawn, for instance. It's a really good area to grow things in. So working with the microclimates that are created on your property are a good idea. Okay, so I went to Lowe's and I saw this plant label. And this, I want to give you an example of how it's such a bad plant. It just says wallflower. Like, it doesn't tell me anything. I don't have a genus. I don't have a species. Maybe it's a hybrid species, but it's a cultivar of some sort. But I don't know. It just says wallflower. And so one of the things I did find that was very exciting on this plant label, it gave us the USDA hardiness zone, 7 to 9. That's fine. That's where we all are living now in that region. It actually gave you the AHS heat zone, which was really great because that, I think, is not always given on plant labels unless you're going to a nursery that's, conscientious and sharing things with you, or you're going to a plant sale here, they may give you that. But I do not live in a heat zone that would support this year round. I may live in a plant zone that does, but so it's really nice. I think that I would encourage plant people to start putting the heat zone because I think that's making a difference now, especially if we're getting warmer summers and we have summers that are consecutively days above 86 degrees. And I know this summer I definitely did get that where I live. And it was 80 degrees yesterday, not 86, which is the heat zone, but it was 80 degrees in October, which usually we're a little cooler by now, but we're not. We were warmer than Durham yesterday, actually, because I checked the weather to come here, and we are warmer right now. And so it's a little wacky what's going on. So I think having those, paying attention to the plant labels, but the plant labels aren't always good. That's the thing. And so really you'll have to do your own research for that. And so in my third section, I want to talk about landscaping for wildlife and biodiversity. And I always encourage this. Come here, go to the Duke Gardens. If you want native, go to the Bloomquist Gardens. It's really beautiful. This is where I studied. Go to the arboretums, the botanical gardens at the other universities. I know Ralston's beautiful at NC State. You live in a wonderful area where you can visit all these things. I live in a great area. Philadelphia is called the garden capital of the country. 30 gardens, 50 gardens within 30 miles or whatever. We really do have beautiful gardens, no doubt. People don't know it, but we really do. Mount Cuba Center is a wonderful garden. It is a former DuPont property. Well, the DuPont family is very, very large in the Delaware, Philadelphia area. And so there are many houses that have been donated now over to gardens. And one of them is Mount Cuba Center, which really does a lot of work on, there's a lot of research out of there. Scientists are working out of there on native plants and cultivars and how they are working with pollinators. So that's a great thing if you do come up to the area to go to the Mount Cuba Center. But I would go online because they tell you a lot of things on their website too, and you can read the studies. If you needed to write a paper on this kind of stuff, there's really great work out of there. And then the native plant sales, the first time I came here, there was a native plant sale, and it was pouring rain, and I still walked around the garden, had a great time. But I would just encourage you to go to these places if you haven't already, and you can learn a lot. And then, of course, go online. And also, by going there, you can get ideas. I mean, we want our properties to be pretty, right? And so you can get ideas on how you can use native plants to still be beautiful. Because I think there's always the concern, well, if I just do native, it's going to look like a bunch of weeds. And no, there's a way of making it beautiful, and you can see it around here and in little pockets, and you can find that. Certainly encourage you to do that. Okay, so how do you create this wildlife-friendly habitat? Well, what we have to do is we have to restore habitat. And this means we're starting right from the ground, from the roots, from the soil. We have to have healthy soil to move up the whole food chain, going up the trophic levels to attract a particular bird to our property. And so I wanted to show you this. You probably saw this about the 3 billion North American birds. It's interesting. This article came out the very last week of January of 2020. And then by February, we were talking about the pandemic. We were talking about a virus, and then by March, that's all we talked about. And so I think a lot of the attention that this would have gotten got drowned out and lost in a global plan, in talking about in healing from a global pandemic. But we are losing species drastically losing species. And I'm just giving examples of birds here, but we are losing species left and right. And so this is just a World Wildlife Federation bar graph. I just wanted to show you, just look at the red up there. Leave the bottom because that's fish and that gets into ocean things. But birds, reptiles, amphibians, mammals, insects, you name it, everything is the majority because of habitat degradation. That's what it is. That's what's going on. What's happening in the ocean is that we are overfishing, and now we have a problem with ocean acidification for some of our mollusk species, but again, that's a different class. Um, so we're also having climate change. So that last blue thing may be along, as we start updating this, playing a bigger role, but habitat degradation is the #1 reason that our species are disappearing. So what do? You restore their habitat. And so when we talk about habitat, so I've taught bio and, well, bio too, not the cellular stuff, but bio too. And when we talk about a species is successful if it not only survives, you survive because you have food and a place to live, but for a species to be successful, it needs to be able to find a mate, reproduce, and have those offspring be successful as well. And so you do not have success for an organism unless it can find a mate, reproduce, and all of those, their offspring are viable as well. And so we can create generations. So we wanted a hummingbird, we put a hummingbird feeder. That's fine, but it didn't find a mate. It didn't reproduce. It didn't have a habitat area to reproduce in to be able to feed its young and have those young grow up and reproduce themselves. And so that is a species success in bio. That's the species concept. So we do need food, absolutely. We do need water, of course. And we have, generally, when we're not in a drought, we have plenty here for our species. This is very good for it. Shelter, so we need to think about nest sites and cover and material and year-round to think about that. And then a healthy ecosystem. We need space for another one of its species to come in so that they can mate and produce offspring and raise their offspring and have food for their offspring and all of that. So we need to recreate that habitat. And so it needs all of these elements, not just food, water, shelter, but also space to create that. And so that another one of their species in the community can come meet them. And so if we are going to go back to our biome map, and we think about what's in the natural habitat in a biome map, in an eastern deciduous forest, it's a very layered forest. And I'll give you, show you some examples, and of course you'll say, yeah, of course, that's what's going on. We've got a tree layer. Think of our, our oaks and our pines, and we've got a lower layer of, let's say, the dogwoods. Then we've got a shrub layer, rhododendrons, azaleas, that's all your shrub layer, blueberries, things like that. And then, just moving down ground cover layers or spring ephemerals, we recreate that. Now, I know I'm getting older. You can't do as much as you could do. Even if you're doing a container garden, think about layers, right? So rather than just planting a plant that you like, that's fine, but to actually layer it. And so even if you did a water garden, to just have layers, because you'll find that insects will come and hang out in those layers, which is really important. And so this is just a picture from the Duke Gardens, but there you go. You get the dogwoods, you get the the oak hickory pines, the taller trees, you get the rhododendrons are so beautiful, the azaleas. I mean, we really have beautiful vegetation where we live. We don't have to look elsewhere. We've got it all here. And so think about layering. I think that's very important. And the layers allow different things to have habitats in different areas. And so layer even in a pot, right? And so I think that's important. I've started to do that now. I'll throw in some decaying wood. Beetles will come and live in there. You'll get insects in there, which is great. So what I'd like to do next is just give some top 10 ecological gardening tips. And I'm using my garden as an example because I don't want this to be so, such a large esoteric thing that people can't do it. I want it to be things that we ourselves can do, whether we live in an apartment that just has a small balcony and we want to create a pot, or we have a half-acre property or a suburban lawn. I want you to think about things that we can do that's tangible, regardless of, physically you're not able to do something, whatever the case might be. So I'm hoping that all of these are things that are manageable for us. Okay, so we talk about planting native, and I think everybody heard that, but the opposite to that, or that mirror, is to avoid the invasive non-native plants. When I first moved to my property, this was there, porcelain berry. I didn't know what it was. I was like, oh, this is kind of pretty. I have pets. I mean, I have a dog that's in the fenced-in yard. Then I found out what it was because I looked it up and I thought this is really bad. So it's not only about planting native, because I think we know that if we're going to make a choice and we want something native on our property, we know to go find this native thing at a native plant sale or look it up. But also think about what you might have that's invasive. And I mean, burning bush is one of my property was full of burning bush. It's very pretty. In about a month, it's going to be gorgeous. But, you know, there's things out there, and as they die off, I mean, you can't go in and remove everything all at once. I understand that. But as things die off, you replace them with something that's maybe a little more manageable. And then I just gave a list here, and I put the scientific name of things that are not good. And if you have Japanese honeysuckle, pull that out. We have native honeysuckle here that's just wonderful. The coral, Bluntcera sempervirens is wonderful, and the hummingbird comes to it all the time. And so these are the types of things that the opposite of plant native, get rid of the invasive that might be on your property if you can. I'm like, I have a whole huge hedge along a street of burning bush, and I can't get rid of it all at once. Those contractors will charge me an arm and a leg, but as they're dying, I'm replacing them with something that, a viburnum, for instance, a native viburnum that would be much better for wildlife. So there's the opposite of plant native, or the, you know, the complement to it is to avoid the invasives. And so a really good example with that was, I think they've removed it, but the Duke Gardens used to have that beautiful wisteria arbor, which is famous in all the paintings and stuff. And it was the Chinese wisteria. And so they took that down and they put American wisteria there. And so I have I guess a pergola, I guess that's what it's called. And I have the Chinese wisteria on one side and I have the American on the other. This Chinese is taking over. We have to cut it back 4 times a year. Again, I don't even live in this climate and I have to cut it back 4 times a year. And I decided this year we're taking it down to 1 branch. And if I have to, I'm going to do what Duke Gardens did, cut that out and just put the American on the other side, because it's still pretty. It's fine. It doesn't have to be as rambunctious as the Chinese wisteria. It's too much. So here's the layers that I was talking about, the plant in layers, whether it's in a pot or here. And I've given you some examples. And so here, if you were looking at oaks, you'll have to look up what oak is native. You could use the eco-region concept and go in there and see what is good for where you live versus not good for where you live. Looking at the red button dogwoods are gorgeous. If you just want a small tree, they're native to what we have. Be careful, get our dogwood, the Cornus species that is native to us. There's so many cultivars of Cornus now that are not native. And so you'd need to do a little research for your yard when you were doing this. And then, you know, your shrub layers are wonderful. Clethra is nice. You know, the rhododendrons are beautiful. You can get so many rhododendron species now. And then, of course, your spring ephemerals are fantastic. They come and they go, and you can get some really beautiful things. And so, again, here's your 4 major layers here. To think about that when you're planting for your property. And then here, add a water source. And it can be, you know, for your birds. They will come. In my case, the squirrels come and drink out of the water source. But you can have all of these wonderful water sources, plant around them. This is interesting. I didn't want to, when I first moved to my property, it came with this tiny little like 8x4 pond, right? Not necessarily planted around much. And so this is wintertime. There are fish in it. And I got the donut, and the donut, essentially what it is it creates an area where the ice won't freeze so that any gases that are developed will just gas off and not poison the fish. And every single morning I'd walk out, and this mourning dove would be on the donut drinking the water inside that was thawed. And so here I was giving water to the bird by, you know, the winter, because the water had frozen where the bird would like to hang. So every morning it would come, then it brought its family, so they would be taking turns going in and drinking water out of there. So having a water source is important, especially in the wintertime, if you have deep freezes that come through, even for a few days to do that. And you can get these, I got, what is that called? The solar bubbler thing. So that attracts everything too. I get them cheap on Amazon. I mean, I'm not spending a lot. And so, you know, just having a water source, really important. Something inexpensive, even just to attract things and feed them. And so skipping the chemicals. And then here's an example right here. This is the native honeysuckle. Instead of Japanese honeysuckle, this is the native one. And so it's still very pretty. It still blooms lovely. They're not all natives here. There's some irises in here that just came up. And so it's not all natives, but there's a big rhododendron in there that is native to our area. But just skipping chemicals. And and you probably know this, if you've got natives, you really don't need to use any chemicals. They'll just, my neighbors can, do you fertilize them? No, I don't do, I'm lazy. If it's not Jersey Strong, it's not staying in my yard if I can't make it. And so there's my baby Edgeworthia, which now is to the top of this arbor. I thought it was going to be my height, and it's clearly not. But yeah, I mean, again, I could tell you to plant native, but I like plants, so I have more than native. But I think that you just skipping the chemicals would be really great, because you're talking about the ecosystem in the soil, you're talking about the bees and the pollinators that come in. All of these things make a difference when we're talking about the whole ecosystem in the long run. Then creating shelter. And one of the big things that you could do if you were choosing between a hardwood tree and, say, a conifer, know that the animals use the conifers quite a bit. They use them for shelter in the winter. They also use them for shade in the summer. I mean, sure, you get shade from your hardwood trees, but they will go in there and nest in there. And then the pine bark is really good. Well, a conifer bark, not necessarily pine bark, is really good for insects to hide inside of and then overwinter in. So if you were choosing, just choosing a conifer would be a really good thing to do for that reason. And here's, I've given a couple of examples here that, again, you could look up the native one for your area and do that as well. And if you had a tree that died, to leave the bark, I did do that. And so thinking about nest boxes as well, to be careful. There's some stuff that they sell on Amazon that has like this formaldehyde paint on it. And so just to be careful, you're better off getting cedar at one of the garden shows or whatever that have been homemade by people at the gardens or some locals, rather than ordering some of this stuff that just smelled, it could smell bad. It can be very dangerous to what might nest in it. And using a gourd is a good nest box, as long as you didn't chemically treat it. I did have a couple of years of this gourd and babies, sparrow babies for multiple years. And so leaving wild corners, leaving the leaves. I mean, that's such a great thing to do, rather than just paying to have them sucked up and taken. I mean, to be able to use those, and there's a lot of bacteria and fungi that are doing great things. I put leaves on top of the garden beds for the winter, and this is a baby bunny. Here's the ear. That's the top of the head. This is a very, very, very cold day in winter, and it was just nestled in there, just trying to keep warm in the leaves. But the leaves are really good biologically. They're really good as they break down. They're really wonderful. And leave wild corners. Things don't have to be perfectly manicured. Just let it be, because when you let it be, you're letting everything that lives in there be and exist in their world, and it's okay. Just I'm really under the proponent. Just let things be. It'll work itself out. And so growing pollinator flowers, this is actually from the Mount Cuba Center, the garden that I was telling about, the former DuPont estate. And really here, having pollinator flowers is important. They do a lot of great studies on what cultivars to use, but also to not, say, have a pollinator plant and then the same plant completely on the opposite end of your yard. To plant in clumps so that a bee, let's say, or some kind of pollinator, it's close by so that it can continue feeding, rather than it has to fly to the other end of the yard or to a different area to get its food source that it may prefer. And so you also get pollination that may happen in that case, and so you're increasing your fruit yields as well. So those are the types of things. And then there's some design elements of saying planting in clumps, but I'm not a designer. But they really have some great ideas on Mount Cuba Center, and I would encourage you to go there. I don't know anybody there. I'm just telling you because, out of experience, that it's really just a great place. And then include fruits and seeds. Definitely be sure to have things like viburnums that have the fruits, because you're migrating birds. They've been migrating. They start in August. They're on their way down to Central America. They use this as their fuel source as they're going. So having seeds, my beautyberry gets eaten up There's two different beauty berries generally that are used in your yards. There's the American and then there's the Chinese one. Um, these berries are gone. I don't even see the beauty berry. One year I said, did it even have any berries this year? And I found a couple. They get eaten up by the birds and the animals in the yard on their way doing whatever they're doing in the fall. And the viburnums are wonderful. They're great. And just to have things that have fruits and seeds, because our wildlife does use all of that, not only for themselves, but as they're raising their young. Because remember, we're thinking of the whole habitat of them being able to raise their young as well. So just a couple examples here that I've given as well. And then limiting the night lights. This is becoming a big problem. I mean, I live in the suburbs. I live very near the city of Philadelphia. It's very bright, right? And so when you're thinking about night lights, to just sort of do the downward ones rather than my neighbors have these obnoxious floodlights that are constantly that they're constantly on. And I'm not going to lecture them and start something, but having something much more subtle, or even having a motion detector so that when you come up, and I know for safety, we need lights. I'm not saying have a dark house, you'd never find your door and your keys, but to do it in a way that's a little less disruptive. I think that they're doing a lot of studies now on the light pollution and how it's impacting our insects and sea turtles, but that's a different story. Again, different class, but yeah, I mean, really having an issue with light pollution. And so to think about that in your yard as well. And so the warm colored ones are kind of the pink and orange, just having those. Okay. And then connecting habitats. And so when I moved in, my dog she's going to be 11. And so she was very young here. And it was all lawn. This is what my house looked like when I bought it. It was very bland suburban lawn. That's what it looked like. And this wasn't working for me, right? And so I said, we're going to dig things up. We're going to plant things. We're going to plant native. At this point, I swore I was only going to plant 100% native, and that didn't work. But I still have a lot of native on my property. But I like plants too much. So this is what it looks like a few years later. I've started digging up the lawn, and I've been putting in beds. And now I'm connecting all these beds together so that they're now big, long beds. And so there's less and less lawn. And then I forbade my husband from putting that fertilizer junk down on the lawn. And we have basically dead lawn, and we probably have the worst lawn in the neighborhood, and I don't care. But because I have so many interesting things in these connected garden beds now that people aren't focused on my lawn, or if they are, I don't care. But yeah, I started putting, and my favorite tree was a southern magnolia from going to school down here. And I have that southern magnolia, which is now very large. It doesn't bloom in the fall the way yours does down here, though. Maybe by next year it will. But, I started really just connecting these beds and just digging up lawn. And I think you have a lecture coming up on getting rid of lawn and making it meadow. This is what I've been trying to do, just digging up lawn. There's still some lawn, but yeah, I've really tried to reduce that and started to put in things. And, it's been a project. It's been a 10-year project, but I'm still working on it. And so I also want to encourage you, if you don't, to really just contribute to citizen science projects. There's a lot of different ones. I actually have my students do one or two every semester because it gets you back out in nature and it gets you contributing data that is important. And you don't have to be a scientist. I teach a lot of non-majors, so you don't have to know a lot about the science to be able to contribute. You could do, bee spotter, dune planting. There's all of these various ones. There's ones along the coast, if you go out to the coast as well. There's a phenology one for fall that I have my students doing in first week of November. But so you can go on scistarter.org and you can find all of these. Here's the bird survey ones, and I think most people who are gardeners pay attention to birds. And so when I first would tell my students, I'm going to have you do bird survey, I don't know birds. I grew up in the city. Well, no, you know your birds, because Celebrate Urban Birds is 16 birds like the robin and the pigeon, and the very common birds that everybody knew. And so that's a very easy one to start with. This is nice in the middle of February, and here I put the dates for this year. It's a great backyard bird count, and you do it on a weekend from your home. You don't even need to go outside. Look out the windows. And this is a global scale bird watching assignment. And so you can download Merlin for free. If you're not sure, you could take a picture of the bird and figure it out. And then there's all these wonderful things like little contests you can get involved in. And so I really encourage everybody to do citizen science stuff if they can. It really does make a difference to contribute to that. And so, thank you. I want to say we're talking about birds. Opened my front door, and this turkey was in the middle of my path. And now the males get very aggressive. And so I just closed the door and went back in. I'm not dealing. They can, well, because they think you may be threatening them if there's a female around. And so they get worked up if they see their reflection in your car, and they'll start attacking your car. And I don't know if you have turkeys as much as I do where I live, but they're pretty special. And right now they're really out because the acorns are falling and that's what they eat. So that I opened the front door to get an Amazon package, and the turkey was there, so I closed the door. And then in the back was a pair of mallards walking by, and this is spring. You can see that the azaleas are blooming, but it's springtime. The mallards and I live very much in the suburbs. I am 8 miles from Philadelphia. Like I'm that close to an urban area. I have urban heat island effect where I live, but I get these birds in my yard that close to the city. And so, thank you. I am available for questions.
So much,
I
Neeti.
hope that you learned stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll bring the microphone up to you in the front. We did have one come in online that I'll get to
Okay.
first. I think this could be a lecture in itself, but do you have any recommendations for good native plant combinations, like what grows well near oak trees or what grows well with coneflowers, for example?
I love the dogwood and the redbud as the understory trees under big pines. And I'm really a proponent of having conifers for our wildlife. And so I love having those. They're both shade tolerant, they're not shade intolerant. So they can grow as understory trees where you have these larger, oaks and pines, for instance. And then under them, having your rhododendrons and your azaleas, because they're gorgeous, you're getting blooms essentially 12 months out of the year. And that's important, because we have our species do live, some of them 12 months out of the year, to think about their housing and their needs year round. And so I love that combination, having the spring ephemerals that come up, like the wood poppy, things like that, early spring that makes you happy. And really just thinking 12 months out of the year, then having those layers of those particular natives, I think are great. Yep.
Okay, I'm intrigued by the 86-degree number.
Yes. Oh, you want to go back to that?
And what's so magical about it? Does it have a biochemical reason, or is it just correlation, or?
There is a biochemical reason, which I cannot tell you off the top of my head. It has to do with plant biology. It does. It has to do with some kind of cellular component in the plant cell, but I don't remember exactly what it is. But yes, there is a biological
Okay, I'll
reason
look it
that they
up.
came up with 86 degrees. Yes. Yeah, for the heat index map, yes.
Yeah, so this one might be a little bit off topic, but is there like a stable like tortoise population here at NC?
Is there what?
Tortoise population, like land turtle, I think I mentioned that. Like,
You must have box turtles and all of that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I think is it stable? Well, I would think that there's plenty, given all the perennial streams you have around here. And you probably have the sliders as well. I think it's the same species that I have where I live, because I still, we at least looked at them and used them for data studies. But yeah, the sliders and the box turtles and all of that. And then you probably, at the coast, you have your brackish water turtles terrapin as well, diamondback terrapin out there. Yeah.
On a cloudy day here, you'll see our resident snapping turtles in
Oh, yeah.
what we call Turtle Pond here. so,
Yeah.
yeah. Any more questions here in the room? I'm going to check online too.
We're okay with time? Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
I was just wondering if, so we're weird because our soil is kind of sweet.
Okay,
So
interesting.
we have a group of plants that tend not to want to, that tend to like more alkaline conditions.
Okay.
And, but I happen to buy one that says it wants acidic.
Yeah.
And like if I give it pine needles for 10 years, can it then take off on its, or persist, or will it have to keep getting babied?
So it depends on what your bedrock is. Is your bedrock some kind of limestone? Is that what's making it?
It's granite. I
Granite.
think.
Riverbed.
Oh, interesting. I would just keep feeding. I mean, you could go buy the aluminum sulfate if you really wanted. People do for that for hydrangeas. The people who don't like pink hydrangeas and their limey soil and they want the beautiful blues that we get up and down the East Coast, they'll buy the aluminum sulfate, but that's very quick acting. It's like Miracle Grow. I would keep just throwing pine needles on there and keeping just even regular hardwood as those break down, it still creates a more acidic environment. I would keep doing that. Yeah, I would just keep doing that rather than putting aluminum sulfate, which will leach out of the soil with the rains.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've lost some before, and I didn't realize that maybe it was the soil itself.
Yeah.
I thought it was the deer, but
It could be the deer too. Yeah, I would just keep throwing pine needles and just leaves. Honestly, leaves as they break down create an acid environment. They really do. Yeah.
Well, I think that puts us right about at time.
Okay,
but,
yes, I think so. Yeah.
My goodness, thank you so much for
Thank
all that
you.
instilling
No,
this
thank you
wonderful wisdom
for-
on us.
Thank you for having me.